yes. All who messaged and all who called said a resounding yes to the Prime Minister's suggestion that the country can now be fully reopened in light of the fact that there was no exponential spike after the taste of Carnival. All right, and that is despite the fact that the Minister of Tourism and Culture could not answer a simple question to the independent senator. A taste of Carnival was still a success, so much so that we can now fully reopen so he could boast about something, Paul.
Find you looking young.
I'm being facetious. I would kid what?
Find you looking young.
I don't know. Maybe it's because of the day I had yesterday. I had a very nice day yesterday.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we do have our guest online. So let's say
in progress.
Thank you, Dorothy. So let's say good morning going on to Mr. Basdeo Panday. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
Not bad at all. Of course, welcome to the Power Breakfast Show. We have Richard Ragoobarsingh, Paul Richards, Wendel, Stephen, and myself.
Okay, I am in good company.
Good morning, Mr. Panday. It's always great to hear from you. How are you?
Yeah,
relaxing yourself?
I am fine, thanks. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm still awaiting your book eagerly.
Yes, so am I actually. What happened is I run into a little difficulty about research, and that is what is holding me back.
Oh. Mr. Panday, I remember clearly when last we interviewed you, you used a term that I have always used. If you don't use it, you will lose it. You still subscribe to that?
That is happening to my voice, actually.
Okay.
You see, when I was in politics, I'd be shouting at everybody all over the place, right? And now that I'm no longer there, I'm beginning to lose my voice. So that statement was quite correct, actually.
Is that an indication then that you may be thinking about a return to politics?
Oh, I have never left politics. The question is, what I left was electoral politics. But as far as love for one's country and the desire to see one country get better and better and better, that kind of politics I've never left.
So how do you respond to the current political climate as we see it now?
I think it's awful. I think it's terrible. People seem to have lost hope, and I am not surprised. So one finds that the government is not performing well and the opposition is not performing well, and there is no system whereby which the people have control over the activities of both parties in the House. So people losing faith in the system, I think.
How did we get here?
And that is why there is more crime. More murders and so on, people taking the law into their own hands because the courts have ground to a standstill almost. So that is the kind of social problems that I think we face.
Mr. Panday, how would you say we got here? What are the reasons that contributed to us getting here?
Corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That's pretty broad. I want to go directly to a quote from your former colleague, Dr. Fuad Khan, who's put a post in the news on social media saying, and I'm quoting, that woman did not build UNC. She was NAR. They attacked UNC in 1991. She benefited from Panday's goodwill in 1995, then undermined him, kicked him and his daughter out, and now boasts that she rid the UNC of its caste and family succession.
Well, that is Dr. Fuad Khan's opinion, and I respect him.
What do you think of the present opposition?
Oh, they're not only non-functional, they are dysfunctional.
In what way?
Well, first of all, I don't think they address the issues. What they believe is a lot of bacchanal and and all talk and attacking people and so on and so forth. But there's very little proposal coming from them as to what is happening in the country, people's needs, their roads and water and this and that sort of thing. You hardly hear them talking about that. All they're talking about is knocking somebody character or something.
Yeah, Mr. Panday, we have the, of course, binary structure of the UNC and the PNM at this point in terms of our political evolution. The issue of third-party politics has always been a conversation that crops up. Do you think it is now a time that a third party can make inroads successfully with the electorate? Or do you think that time is not yet here?
Well, there are two things. One is that because of the system, the political system of the Westminster system of first past the post and that sort of thing, that coupled with the fact that the country is divided between ethnic groups, races, and that sort of thing. And that has led to racial politics in Trinidad and Tobago. And that has crippled us from the beginning of time. I think I was able to make a little movement because I was associated with the labor movement, and the labor movement was a non-racial movement, and so it worked. But what happened is that it is neither the government nor the opposition wants change in the political system, and it is absolutely necessary that we reform the Constitution and we change the political system to negate the tendency to vote along racial and ethnic lines.
Mr. Panday, I remember.
But how do you go about achieving that change? I hear you, but let's assume UNC or PNM gets a constitutional majority, because it doesn't seem as if consensus is going to work in the current climate. So let's assume UNC or the PNM gets that constitutional majority in parliament. A lot of the times when governments have that kind of power, they don't want to tinker with the system that gave them that power. It takes a certain amount of altruism and elevated thinking to have the kind of foresight that you're talking about in terms of the future of the country. Do you think our current leaders have that kind of mindset?
I agree with what you're saying, absolutely. The point about it is that neither the government nor the opposition want constitutional change. That means change of the political system, because they'd no longer be able to resort on race. So political change can only come about peacefully in Trinidad and Tobago through a vote in Parliament. That is to say, you have to have the required majority, which the present Constitution requires in order to change it. But only 3 persons had that kind of majority. And Dr. Eric Williams, he had it. Robinson had it, and Kamala had it. Only 3 persons in the history of this country had the power to change it. Eric Williams pretended to change the Constitution, but it was a change of form and not of substance. The Westminster system remained, and the Westminster being imposed upon us in a country divided as we are is bound to lead to that kind of division and, what shall I say, inertia in the politics.
One of the things you referenced earlier on, the issues you referenced earlier on, is when the labor movement came together in the 70s, and I remember the song Indians and Negroes Unite, because there was a common challenge in terms of the elites and the racism at that time facing East Indians and Afro-Trinidadians in the country. Do you think there's a similar challenge facing us that can force the country to unite past the political divide, past the race divide, which is really the political divide in this country, UNC versus PNM, that can move us in that direction again, or don't we have, because we had a pandemic and I didn't do it.
I think given the present system and given the present attitude of the government and the tendency of both sides to resort to race as a means of political support, I don't think they will want change. And if they don't want change, then it cannot be done peacefully. But there are replete examples all over the world in which when people really want change and they can't get it peacefully, they resort to violence. There are lots of examples all over the world about that. And I fear that may very well happen in Trinidad.
You spoke about the opposition's shortcomings earlier on. How do you, and you did reference the government's also not performing. What do you think are the main shortcomings of this administration presently?
The opposition?
The government.
The government.
Well, one cannot give the government any credit when the basic necessities in the country people are longing for. Their roads and water and lights and all that sort of, and crime, and the country is in chaos. And if the country is in chaos, the government cannot be complimented for that.
What of the recent reshuffle? What are your thoughts on the movement of the Attorney General and the placements of other ministers in ministries? I think Penelope Beckles and Camille Robinson switched places. Terence Rambarat resigned. Kazim Hussein has moved to agriculture. What do you think of these shifts last week?
As far as the welfare of the country is concerned, there will be no effect. It's just like you're shuffling a pack of cards. If a minister is moved, that means the minister is not doing the job properly. And if the minister is not doing the job properly and you put them in another ministry, why should that ministry now work properly? So that you see what is happening here. So to just move one minister and put another minister is putting a minister who has failed, otherwise you wouldn't move them, into a ministry, which of course they'll fail again. So it wouldn't have any effect upon the welfare and life and happiness of the people.
Mr. Panday, I want to go back a bit to the UNC and their succession planning, which seems to be absent in light of the fact that Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar would have lost a total of about 10 to 11 elections on a trot and is still holding on to office without indication of a clear successor in the UNC. How do you see the future of the UNC under that condition?
First of all, I don't believe one should prepare a successor. I don't believe. The choice of leadership should belong to the people and not to those who are holding power. And you see, the elections, internal elections in the UNC are rigged all the time. And because they are rigged, there'll be no change. Just ask anyone who contested the elections, the internal elections in the UNC, and they'll tell you that it's been rigged. So once the present leadership has control, complete control over the party and the election process, there'll be no change. And therefore, there's no point in planning. How can you plan that someone should lead the country?
But Mr. Panday, how could you reconcile saying that leadership elections in the UNC are rigged when you were in fact leader back in the day and you would have lost to Kamala Persad-Bissessar? How was that one rigged?
Ask what's his name? Sorry.
I know the name, but I won't prompt you.
I forgot what Jack Warner.
Yeah, I know that was the name you were going to call.
Jack Warner openly admitted that election was rigged. Openly. So I think it is clear that it was rigged, and every successive party in internal party elections since that have been rigged. And ask anybody who has contested the elections, they'll tell you that.
So where is the future of the UNC then? If it is that after 11 or so successive losses, that they would go back into election with the same leader?
Yes, I think they will, because the leader controls the vote, the electoral mechanism and machinery in the party, and rigs it in such a way that she'll stay in office. So there'll be no change there. I don't think so. Not peacefully, anyway. And therefore, things will simply continue as they are continuing until people get mad enough. As I say, if they can't change it peacefully, we'll change it by violence.
Well, Mr. Panday, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the Tobago election result with the PDP sweeping 14 of the seats? And do you think that sentiment is translatable to Trinidad, or is Tobago a different scenario politically and socially?
First of all, I think what happened in Tobago is an expression of the people being fed up with the government. They were simply fed up with the government and they made a change. But in Tobago, they do not have that kind of racial problem that we have in Trinidad. So that is why they succeeded. People who got fed up succeeded in removing the PNM. In Trinidad, once the elections are called, they degenerate to a racial battle. That's the difference between the two.
So you don't think that what happened in Tobago is translatable to Trinidad, even if the sentiment may be similar?
No, I don't. Not under the present system, and with the elections between the present two political parties.
But you're saying we have a weak government and a weak opposition. So what is the outcome of that in an election? The incumbents, the default stays in place? Is that what we're facing?
I think we'll get a repeat of what has been happening over the years. I don't think the opposition is in any position to win any elections. So that means that the PNM remains in office.
Do you see the possibility of a party led or inclusive of Gary Griffith, who would have worked closely with your government too back in the day? Do you see a party with him included making any impact on the electorate?
Yeah, a third party.
No, I don't, because what is he going to offer? What is he going to offer? Of course, there's very little. Nobody knows what the policy is, what the direction is, what is the vision of the society. Nobody knows that. So I do not know how successful he will be.
But if it is, I mean, I'm hearing the conversation, Mr. Panday, and it seems you paint a very dark picture of the politics of Trinidad and Tobago, and like it's in a place of stasis, that it's not moving anywhere, and that it's more of the same and will continue to be more of the same. But surely, because change is constant, surely, I mean, the generation of Trinidadians and Tobagonians who are 18 and more coming through the line, who are maybe not as rigid in terms of that their adherence to party politics, maybe the people who are 40 and under, surely the change lies with them. And surely the hope and the future of the politics lies with that age group who may not be as fanatical to either the UNC or the PNM, or do you think that they are part of the stasis too?
You are absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct, and that is the point I'm making. The population more and more is becoming fed up of both parties, and they want change. They cannot get change under the present system. That when I say change, I mean changing the Constitution. They cannot get change under the present system by peaceful means. That is why I fear that they may get change otherwise.
You know, there's a poet in Jamaica called Muta Baruka who would have sung. He had a poem called "By the Ballot, by the Bible, by the Bullet, by the Gun. any which way, change must come. Is that something you will subscribe to?
I do subscribe to violence. I wish there were peace change taking place peacefully. What I'm saying is what is inevitable, not what I wish. What I'm saying is that the young, you were so right when you said that the young people are fed up of both systems. They want change. They cannot get change peacefully because to get change peacefully, you have to do it through the parliament. And the parliament is under the control of the both parties that don't want constitutional change. So that you are right. They are crying out for change. And what I'm saying is, if they do not get it peacefully, I fear that violence will
But
be.
who is going to galvanize and inspire these young people right now? Let's just say even that they just this passionate because all they see is same old, changing faces, changing spaces, and generally what happens in countries where even if God forbid there's the uprising type initiation of change, there is usually some figure or something to inspire that new group to move to elicit the change. There have been your daughter, the Gary Griffiths, I loathe to mention Philip Alexander, and others who are proffering change, Fuad Abubakar, who are proffering Farley Augustine, that we need a new face, we need a new dispensation. But who is going to bring them together? Or is it going to be just the abject rejection of the status quo at some point when they reach breaking point?
As you said, my daughter Michaela has a party, and she is trying to mobilize people and help the poor and suffering people and so on. She's doing that kind of work at the moment, and there are other political.
But your daughter faces the criticism of, with the greatest of respect, of while she's a great advocate, very articulate, extremely intelligent, of basically riding on your work and your family's name. How do you respond to that?
People ask that question. How do you? Let me see. I forgot what she said. Yeah, somebody says, "How do you feel walking in your father's shadow?" And she said, "I'm not walking in his shadow. I'm walking in his light." Now, that's a very significant statement. That means what she has inherited. Is hers. That's what that means. That means she is not me and I'm not her. She is her own person who inherited a pattern of behavior and a pattern of working and a pattern of thinking and so on and so on. But that happens with every family. Barrett's father was a politician. In Canada, the prime minister is the son of a former prime minister.
But does that necessarily mean she has what it takes to do the kind of work that you did? Yes, she's inherited you. She's been mentored by you to some extent. She has your genes, your DNA. She's very intelligent. But does that necessarily mean that she has what it takes?
The people will decide that, of course.
Yeah, I agree. I suppose that ultimately is the litmus test that the people decide. I'm just wondering, Mr. Panday, in our analysis of the political state of Trinidad and Tobago and how we move forward, whether we are underestimating the dissatisfaction and the level of dissatisfaction of the electorate in the current two parties, and whether if a third party with an inspiring leader can somehow change the dynamic in a dramatic way that will befuddle this kind of analysis, that will throw the former usual analysis of the race politics, etc., out of the window. Do you think that's at all possible?
Anything is possible, of course. But what I think happened is that I think the young people want change. And I believe that the young people will get together and that the young people will have a party which they believe can mobilize a certain portion of the election of the electorate and win seats in parliament. If they do win seats in parliament, if they contest the election and they are strong, supported by the young and that sort of thing, what will happen? If they win seats, they either can win the government, or they can win the opposition, or they can win the balance of power between the two in parliament, and so try to bring about peaceful change. I think that is the only possibility I can think of.
Right now, I mean, in my conversations with younger people than myself, and especially like Generation Z, the people who are now turning 19, 20 and stuff, a lot of that group does not see their future lying in Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of that group talks about going out of Trinidad and Tobago because they don't see the opportunities and their prospects in this country. How, and which of course is to the detriment of the country. I don't know if you have that sort of sense of that happening, but my conversations with some of them, that seems to be the trajectory. How do we as a country prevent this happening? Because you need those young people here.
Exactly. We have to give them the hope for change. We have to do that somehow. We have to give them the hope that there'll be change, and this is the country which they must serve, and this is the country in which all their intellectual and manpower will be used to develop the country. We have to convince them that there will be some kind of change. And you're right. If we don't, they will leave the country, and they'll go abroad. And all our bright people, all our technically skilled people will leave. And so we will come another kind of Haiti, I think.
It would be remiss of us not to ask you your thoughts on Ukraine, Russia, and where do you think that's heading?
Well, what is happening there is really a play of international geopolitics. And what happens is that, as you know, the Ukraine borders on the on Russia. And Russia obviously do not want an antagonistic nation on its doorstep. On the other hand, there is NATO that's trying to get that country to come over on their side. And the Russians view that as an act which will endanger their own safety. So I think that is the reason for the conflict. But I think they'll solve it, eventually.
Because do you think the present approach of sanctions is going to make any difference to Mr. Putin, President Putin?
It will impact, but I don't think it will bring him down.
Mr. Panday, if I can just run back to the local politics. Clearly, at age 89, a lot of people listening to you this morning, because I'm getting a lot of messages about the interview, are still very much impressed and enamored by you and your wit and your knowledge of the politics. Are you consulted at all in any way by anybody in the UNC, those who hold office now or those who aspire to hold office? Are you sought after?
No. As a matter of fact, after Kamla Prasad Bissessa won the elections in 2010, was it? I offered to help. I went to her house actually with two friends of mine and asked. I said, "Please tell me what I can do to assist." And the eventual situation was a total rejection of that offer. So that is as far as I try to help.
Is it that she told you, "Listen, get away from here, I don't need your help"?
No, when I went there, she began talking all kinds of things instead of answering the question of how I can help. She kept telling me, "Well, you should know what to do," and that sort of thing, which obviously she did not want to answer, or she did not want to have me helping her. It was simple as that.
Did you went there on one of the days of the 5-day weekends?
A 5-day weekend?
Yeah, we were told by certain people that she had 5-day weekends as opposed to our normal 2-day weekends.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I think maybe I did.
Okay.
Oh, I
Wendell,
love your
Wendell drag into the back and how you
I love your subtlety.
I
Hello,
learned a
Wendell
lot from
Stephen.
you, Mr.
Drag
Panday.
into the back
You
and
and Mr. Patrick Manning. I learned so much from both of you.
Are there any rising stars in addition to, of course, your daughter who impress you in the politics these days, Mr. Panday?
No, not really. Not really. I'm trying to help her as best I can to build a party where the youths are in control, not the old fogies and so on. The youths are in control, and I believe the answer is going to be mobilization of the young people. And as I say, if they are mobilized enough, they can either win the government, win the opposition, or win the vote that controls the parliament. That is to say, there'll be a minority, but if they add their votes to either the opposition or the government, they can bring about change. I believe that can happen.
So you think a new party getting even 3 or 4 seats can be a negotiating point to encourage either side to move in a more productive direction? That's what you think, Singh?
Sure. It depends on the figures, of course. It depends upon the figures. That is to say, if a new party can hold the balance of power. That's the word I wanted to use, I forgot. If a new party can hold the balance of power, they can effect change peacefully.
Yeah. Mr. Panday, I want to take this opportunity to remind you of something. You may not remember, but I'll remind you anyway. When you became prime minister, in 1995, following the snap election of Mr. Manning, I was a supplier to the prime minister's residence at the point in time. And I started to get official invitations to your Christmas party every year. And I remember myself, Terry Rondon was also a supplier. Terry Rondon was a PNM council also too. And he was also a supplier to the residents. And at some point in time, someone tried to get us removed from the residence as suppliers. And you intervened. That's what I was told. You intervened and said, no, they have been supplying here. We are satisfied with the product. Leave them alone. I always remember that. And I always remember looking at you at the Christmas parties from a distance and how you enjoyed yourself. So I just thought I'd remind you of that and let the public know.
I don't even remember that. But what would happen? That is what would happen. If some people are doing a job and they are doing it properly, why should you discriminate against them for political reasons? Why? So that that is how I would have acted. I don't, of course, remember the details, but that's what I would have done if they're doing a good job. They're doing a good job. Doesn't matter what political party they belong to.
Yeah. When there's example drew my mind to a question. What do you think of the present state of the public service, and in particular the PS system, which at some point used to be a great check and balance to runaway politicians who sought the proper procedure?
Sure. Because of political interference in the public service is now confused with itself. For example, as I told you, corruption, waste, and mismanagement. If you appoint people on the basis of political patronage in managerial positions, they can't manage, obviously. And that is what has been happening. People have been being appointed on the basis of cronyism, political preferences, that kind of irrelevant criteria.
Mr. Panday, I mean, of course, the interview is getting close to its conclusion. Are you hopeful for the future of Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes. And the only reason for that is if I'm not hopeful, I'll die.
Do you have any regrets at all, Mr. Panday, of your political career? You have any regrets at all?
Well, I wish I had continued for another term. I think I could have brought about a lot of change in as far as the public is concerned, as far as the happiness and comfort of the public is concerned. If you look back at the history, you'll see all the kinds of things we did that made the public happy, and that is the function of government. The function of government is to create the greatest happiness among the greatest number of your citizens. And that probably is what I have in mind.
You know, coming from the currently 1975, why do you think we have not been able to be as successful in the agriculture sector over the last 20 years?
Because of the power of the import food lobby that imports, 4 billion worth of food every year or something like that. And it is the power of that over governments, both the government and the opposition, that has led to things like 70,000 acres of fertile lands left by Caroni Limited was not distributed to farmers, but was allowed to friends and family to squat on it and so on. That is the kind of problem we face.
So big business is the catalyst for the neglect of the agriculture sector, because if we grow more food, we will not need to import as much, and big business will not make as much money.
Well, they'll probably make money, but in other direction. The object is that in order to promote agriculture in Trinidad, you've got to deal with production. And things like we have to have a food processing plant so that farmers will be guaranteed a price, and so people will be encouraged to go into farming. But that hasn't been done. And as I say, the best example, or the worst example, is the lands of Caroni Limited being left idle when it could have been given to farmers. But it was not because of the power of the food import lobby on the government, both the government and the opposition, as you see.
Yeah. Do you still subscribe or use the term parasitic oligarchy to describe the big business?
Parasitic oligarchy, I wrote something, but I didn't publish it. It needs to be defined. And you go into the dictionary, you'll see the parasitic oligarchy. You see, oligarchy is a term that is used to describe a government of the few. Mm-hmm. And what we had was a parasitic oligarchy. That is a government that was a government of the few.
You've had some wonderful stingers over the years, and that was one of them.
For sure. Mr.
Panday, well, I don't know about my colleague, but we want to thank you. Of course, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Always a pleasure. You've done so much for this country.
Thank you very much, and I'm available at any time you wish.
We miss you and Mr. Manning's wit. Although you were political adversaries, it never descended to sometimes what we see today, and there was always a sense of elegance and articulation, though politically confrontational in the way you carried yourselves, and I certainly miss it.
Yeah,
I describe that by saying, Mr. Manning was not my enemy; he was my political opponent, and there is a difference. He's a human being. He's doing what he believes to be right and so on. And as a human being, how can I be against him as a human being? But I can be against him with what he's doing that I politically, economically, that I believe to be wrong. And so, as I say, he was not an enemy. He was a political opponent.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Panday, thanks so much for joining us on the Power Breakfast Show this morning. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure.
I want the
All right, all right. As I put down this phone, I'll start writing again.
And you could publish the parasitic oligarchy manuscript that you have there lying around. That's the silver fox laugh.
Yeah,
that's the silver fox
That's the
laugh.
laugh.
Steve, we're gonna save that and put it in
no kidding,
for a special effect. Thank you for that special effect, Mr. Panday. No copyright administered.
Sure.
Have a great day. Be safe.
Thank you so much, Mr. Basdeo Panday, for being on the Power Breakfast Show.
You too. Thank you very much.
All the best. You be safe. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
I so miss that in the parliament.
Yes, sir.
You just miss the level of intellect and articulation. They were, as he said, political adversaries and enemies, and there was an eloquence and an elegance to the way they carried themselves.
Yeah. Well, I'll
You,
tell
you never
something,
got a sense that I hate you and I hate you.
Yeah.
It was a battle of wits.
Always.
You get that now?
Always.
Yeah, my perception is I can't stand you and I can't stand you either. And it seems personal.
Yes. Our listener, I got several messages there, and our listener said, Keith Watkins, he said, new politicians should study this interview and his economy of language. So maybe we might, this is an interview that might be worth repeating from time to time. Maybe a day Steve could give us a day off, you and Paul, and just repeat this interview. You know, either Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, give us a day off and we could repeat this interview.
Not Tuesday and Thursday.
No. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's when people listen. Most people. Yeah, I'm not to say.
You look young today.
Yeah, no, I tell you that week.
Let me give you a joke with Mr. Panday.
I slept.
I should have reminded him when he was on the line. When I was at
just to interrupt you, Ruben is saying that the interview is available on YouTube already.
Right.
Oh,
when I was at 96.1, I did a Sunday show and Mr. Panday came for an interview. It was at the heat of his battle with Ken Gordon, where he called Ken Gordon a pseudo-racist. So I'm going down in this interview and we're talking about the issues, and he was prime minister at the time, I think. And I remember, for lack of a better phrase, getting him to the point where I'm saying, well, don't you think if you call someone a pseudo-racist, which is essentially calling them a racist, you should apologize? And as a prime minister, you should be more careful with your words and stuff like that. And Mr. Panday paused, because you almost like you catch him in a spot. And he looked at me. He said, you know what? Has anyone ever told you you're a very handsome man?
And of course you would have said no.
No, I was so thrown. I was so thrown off, because it was so left field.
Right.
That the whole trend, that's the kind of intellectual and political acumen he has.
Yeah.
That he would come from so left field that he threw off the energy of the interview at that point.
Yeah.
Never to be recovered.
Yeah.
And then he gave the same laugh there that he gave there. And the interview was basically over because he totally disarmed me.
Right.
You understand? Mr. Manning was the same thing. Mr. Manning would come in and give you a million platitudes. By the time Mr. Manning, the late, finished with you have a hard time going in on him.
Yeah, too hard.
Because Mr. Manning was so charming.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so those are politicians that you can only have great respect for, and they were fallible. Let's not pretend they weren't perfect, but history will be kind to them because of what they did for this country and the way people respect them. Well, certainly I do today.
Yes, for sure. Mr. Manning, I know, died with a broken heart, in my opinion, and maybe when Mr. Panday expires, clearly he will also have a broken heart for how he felt he was treated and cheated.
They love this country. No, but I think they love this country at all.
Yeah.
I think both of them.
Which is why I would have asked, is he hopeful?
Yeah.
For Trinidad and Tobago and the future. I know a lot of people feel a sense of hopelessness for their future. They feel a sense of hopelessness and depression. I mean, brought about in part by COVID and the negativity of the COVID umbrella, so to speak, around us. So how do you get out of that? How do you inspire hope? How do you inspire optimism How do you address those issues in a population? Do you even think it needs addressing?
Yeah.
Because I don't think the leaders think it needs addressing, and it does.
Yes.
It does. And of course, he answered, "Well, if I wasn't hopeful, I'd be dead."
Yeah.
And I liked his definition of government. It's about providing happiness to the greatest number of people. It's a simple explanation, but there's a lot in that.
Yes.
Well, that's what the simplicity is will last forever, It's eternal.
Yeah.
You may get too convoluted and you have to explain it, you lose the essence of it. 8 o'clock.
All right.
Steve slow today, boy. Whew.
He was yawning just now. I don't know if you all saw it.
Well, the interview was a bit intellectual, so he would yawn.
Oh,
Paul,
Lord,
behave
have
yourself.
mercy.
Paul Richards, behave yourself.
Hey,
It's a good thing you're not listening.
Steve like Bacchanal,
Steve Khan is always listening.
Steve love Bacchanal.
He's on his phone,
Love a Bacchanal,
Don't worry, he could be on his phone, his other ear is listening.
Eh.
And he has big ears, so he's always hearing.
Mm-hmm.
He could
Steve,
fly,
Steve. He's not realizing
Yes.
he muted. Steve?
I know I'm muted.
Oh, okay. All right. I was coming to your defense.
Just coming to whose defense?
Yours.
He didn't hear. Leave it alone. News is next.
Nah, he ain't here.
Let's get into news. All right. Evie just walked in, all powered by Champ Auto Services.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
Former political leader of the UNC, Basdeo Panday, says he has never left politics. He made the